الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. صلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد. Today, inshallah ta'ala, we will look at the last 6 chapters of the Qur'an. The 6 last chapters of the Qur'an. And they're well-known surah chapters of the Qur'an, and they have some important meanings that we'll look at inshallah, and we will focus a little bit more on the remaining 2 surah, the last 2 chapters of the Qur'an. A bit more focus will be placed on them today bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Kafirun, قُلْ يَا أَيُّهَا الْكَافِرُونَ. قُلْ, when Allah Ta'ala says قُلْ in the Qur'an, what does that mean? Say. Who's being addressed? The Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And so it is قُلْ, say, O Messenger of Allah, يَا أَيُّهَا الْكَافِرُونَ, O you who have disbelieved. لَا أَعْبُدُ مَا تَعْبُدُونَ, I will not worship what you worship, and I don't worship what you worship. And this is because the kuffar of Quraysh said to the Prophet ﷺ, they tried to have him compromise on some of his religion. So they said, we worship your God one day and you worship ours one day. Or you worship our God for part of the time and we worship yours for part of the time. And of course they kept trying to compromise with him as much as possible. When they found that he's not accepting, he's not being silenced, he's not keeping quiet about this message of his, they tried to come to a compromise and say, okay, we worship your God, but you also worship ours. So this surah came to do 2 things. It came to invalidate the religion of the disbelievers, so that nobody claims that so long as a person is being a nice person, then that is sufficient for them to be successful in the next life. Because that, although sounds like a nice argument, is an emotional argument, not one based on facts. Because the dunya and the akhirah is the creation of Allah Ta'ala. Human beings are the creation of Allah Ta'ala. Jannah is not ours. If someone said to you, you have the keys to Jannah, and you can allow into it anyone you want, anyone, who would you allow to go in? If you had the keys to Jannah, you had the keys to Jannah, and it said to you, anyone who you want to go in will go in, who would you allow in?
Everyone.
Everyone. Yeah?
Yeah.
Jazakallah khair. What about you?
Everyone.
Even the people you don't like?
Yeah.
Yeah?
We're doing good.
They might do some good things. Right, okay. That's fine. That's great if the Jannah is ours. No problem. But the problem is, Jannah is not ours. And we don't have the keys to Jannah. And Allah created us as servants. Some people, these 2 are very nice boys, mashallah, because they said we'll let everyone in. Some people say, I'll let no one in except me. Yeah? I've got the keys to Jannah, no one's coming in except me. And some people who are a bit more reasonable will say, I let all the people I like in. Those who I don't like are not coming in. Everyone's going to have their own decision based on what they feel is good and what they feel is right. And that's clearly problematic. That's obviously a problem. And this is why it's important to see ourselves as human beings as servants to Allah. We have nothing but that. We have no choice but to be servants. Either we are going to worship and be slaves to Allah, or we're going to worship and be slaves to something else. Either other gods or other idols, or our own desires, our own self. أَرَأَيْتَ مَنِ اتَّخَذَ إِلَهَهُ هَوَاهُ. Have you not seen the one who takes his own desire as a god, as Allah Ta'ala says in the Qur'an? Why? Because if you are following something without control, then you've taken it as a god. You've almost worshipped it. And so this surah came to invalidate that religion. The religion of polytheism, the religion of worshipping other than Allah, and saying, look, the point here is not about whether a person worshipped some sort of God, or whether the person was from a nice family. The point is here, Allah has created us. He is the one who puts guidelines for who is successful and who's not successful. And that's really important, because someone might pose that question and say, well, this person was a good person. And Aisha radiallahu anha posed this question to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. She said, so and so used to feed the poor and used to do this and used to do that. Is that going to benefit him? He said he never said once in his life, oh Allah, forgive me on the Day of Judgment. Because there are prerequisites for entering Jannah, being successful in the Akhirah. And any person who has the message of Islam clarified to him and then doesn't accept it, then the rule is what? The rule is that that person won't be entered into Jannah. Can we say he will not enter Jannah? No, you don't say that. Let's say I know that somebody passed away and he didn't accept Islam. Do I say about that individual, he's going to Jahannam? That's incorrect. To say that would be incorrect. Because you do not make judgments upon individuals. Allah Ta'ala has given us a general rule, and that is that the one who says La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah enters Jannah, and the one who fails to do so does not enter Jannah. That's the rule. Allah Ta'ala is the one who decides who has a valid excuse, who doesn't have a valid excuse. Allah is the one who decides whether the message has reached him or it hasn't reached him. That's really important to keep in mind. And that does not mean that you say everyone is upon the truth, because that's incorrect. Allah Ta'ala has made the truth one, and that's the religion of Islam. And that does not mean you say everyone enters Jannah. And that does not mean say that everyone could enter Jannah. Look, there are guidelines for entering Jannah. But the point is, you don't specify individuals. You don't specify individuals unless it's explicitly mentioned by Allah or His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, like we will see with Abu Lahab and his wife, because that's mentioned in the Qur'an. And this is why in the books of Aqidah, the books of Creed, the scholars rahimahumullah say, وَلَا نَقْطَعُ لِأَحَدٍ بِجَنَّةٍ وَلَا نَارٍ. We do not say for certain he is in Jannah and he is in Jahannam, but we are hopeful for the one who does good, we're optimistic, and as for the one who does bad, then we fear for that person. We fear for such a person. So Allah Ta'ala with this surah intended two things. What are the objectives of this surah? Two things. Firstly, إِبْطَالُ دِينِ الْمُشْرِكِينَ, invalidating the religion of shirk. It's an invalid religion, it's an unacceptable religion, it's not accepted with Allah, it's false. Secondly, the second objective is to cut off any hope that the people of Quraysh may have had in the Prophet ﷺ leaning towards them. Just to cut off any hope that they had, Allah Ta'ala revealed the surah and said, قُلْ يَا أَيُّهَا الْكَافِرُونَ, say, O you who disbelieve, لَا أَعْبُدُ مَا تَعْبُدُونَ, I don't worship what you worship. وَلَا أَنَا عَابِدٌ مَا عَبَدْتُمْ, and I will not be worshipping what you worship. وَلَا أَنْتُمْ عَابِدُونَ مَا أَعْبُدُ, and you don't worship what I worship. وَلَا أَنَا عَابِدٌ مَا عَبَدْتُمْ, and again, I am not worshipping that which you worship. Is repeated to show emphasis. Then he said, لَكُمْ دِينُكُمْ وَلِيَ دِينِ, you have your religion and I have my religion. For you is your religion and for me is my religion. And so these two things are there as an objective for this surah. Now, sometimes this verse is misinterpreted, because لَكُمْ دِينُكُمْ وَلِيَ دِينِ means you have your religion and I have mine. Does that mean that all religions are the same in truth and validity, acceptability? No, of course not. Of course not. Okay. But people have the message of Islam clarified to them. If they accept it, alhamdulillah. If it's rejected, then that's beyond our control. It's not for us to force a religion down people's throats, because that's not how faith works. If someone says to you, I want you to love that person, do it now. Do it now, otherwise I'm going to kill you. Can you love that person? By them forcing you? What if they threaten to kill you? Will you love that person? Huh? Maybe.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Not sure? What do you think? If someone puts a knife down your throat and says to someone who you don't really like, or you don't really know maybe, you have to love that person now.
You can say that I do love it, but in your heart you don't accept it.
Okay, good answer. Jazakallah khair. You can say I love that person, but does that change anything in your heart? No. So if you put down a knife down someone's throat, accept Islam, is that Islam accepted? Maybe. If that person's convinced of Islam, is that excellent. But that doesn't require a knife down the throat to convince someone of Islam. But if he does say that he accepts Islam, then it doesn't mean that it's true. Because what accepts Islam is the heart. And so forcing things down people's throats is not a good objective. It's not a good way of trying to teach Islam. Forcing things down people's throats, no. But clarifying and teaching and explaining and acting upon Islam is the best way to do so. طيب, Allah Ta'ala says here, وَلَا أَنْتُمْ عَابِدُونَ مَا عَبُدُ, and nor are you going to worship that which I worship. So the Prophet ﷺ here is addressing the disbelievers and saying to them, you're not going to accept this religion either. Why? Okay, we know the Prophet ﷺ will not accept their religion because he knows it's false. But why will they not accept the religion of the Prophet ﷺ even though it's true? This of course doesn't apply to everyone, because some people at the time of this verse being revealed were non-Muslim and they later accepted Islam. It doesn't mean that this verse is applying across the board. Everyone who's not Muslim today will not accept Islam ever again. That's obviously not what's meant. But Al-Imam al-Bukhari rahimahullah says this verse was revealed about people who were not just rejecting of Islam, but were staunch enemies to Islam. Because if you hate something so much and you reject it even though you know it's true, then the hopes of you accepting Islam is almost gone. It's not necessarily definitely gone, but it's almost gone. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the verse of Bukhari rahimahullah uses to explain this is the verse of Allah Ta'ala, وَلَا يَزِيدَنَّ كَثِيرًا مِّنْهُمْ مَا أُنزِلَ إِلَيْكَ مِنْ رَبِّكَ طُغْيَانًا وَكُفْرًا فَلَا تَأْسَ عَلَى الْقَوْمِ الْفَاسِقِينَ. And some of them, the more Allah reveals down to them, the more it leads them into kufr. The more Allah reveals from the Qur'an, the more it leads them into disbelief. Because that's how the hearts are. Some hearts are accepting, some hearts are in between, willing to accept, and some hearts are completely turned away. But hearts become like that. Otherwise, all hearts are born pure. All hearts are born pure. That's very important. Because the Prophet ﷺ said, كل بني آدم يولد على الفطرة. Every son of Adam is born upon the fitrah. What's the fitrah? The fitrah is the pure heart that is capable of accepting the truth. The fitrah doesn't necessarily mean Islam. Because to be a Muslim, you have to say the Shahada. And someone who's just born, hasn't said the Shahada, doesn't understand Islam. So some people loosely say, everyone is born a Muslim. Everyone is born Muslim. And that's a common statement that people state. Everyone is born Muslim. And that's where this word revert comes from. No, don't say he accepted Islam. He reverted to Islam. Why? Because he was born a Muslim. That's problematic. Because to be a Muslim, there have to be certain conditions. To be a Muslim, there are certain conditions, and that is for you to testify that there's no true God except Allah, and the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is his messenger. And someone who is just been born doesn't know that, because Allah Ta'ala says, وَاللَّهُ أَخْرَجَكُم مِّن بُطُونِ أُمَّهَاتِكُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ شَيْئًا. Allah takes you out of the wombs of your mothers, and you do not know anything. لَا تَعْلَمُونَ شَيْئًا. You don't know anything. So someone who's newly born doesn't know anything, doesn't know Islam, and doesn't know anything else. But what does he have? What's he born upon? He's born upon the fitrah. The hadith doesn't say Islam, it says the fitrah, which is that clean slate that is able to accept Islam and also able to turn away from Islam. And this is why nobody is born evil and nobody is born rejecting Allah. No one. but everyone is born with a pure heart and a clean slate that is capable of accepting and capable of rejecting, depending on Allah's guidance first and foremost, and secondly depending on the person's surroundings and what they're influenced by and so on. And this is why the Prophet ﷺ said, every son of Adam is born upon the fitrah, and his parents are the one that turn him into a Jew or a Christian and so on. So it's outside influence that turn such a person into changing the religion of Islam. Otherwise, their heart is pure. So to say everyone is born Muslim is questionable. It's not quite accurate. But to say everyone is born upon the fitrah, as the Prophet ﷺ said, that's correct. That's correct. And so that's why if someone says he accepted Islam or converted to Islam, there's no issue there at all. There's no issue in saying someone converted to Islam, because he went from something, and the word used in the Qur'an is that people enter into Islam. إذا جاء نصر الله والفتح ورأيت الناس يدخلون في دين الله أفواجا. And you see people, when it comes to that surah, entering into Islam in huge numbers of people. So entering into Islam is a good term to use when describing when someone accepts Islam and so on. And this idea of you have to say reverted, it's not correct. Allah Ta'ala says in the following surah, إِذَا جَاءَ نَصْرُ اللَّهِ وَالْفَتْحِ. When the victory of Allah comes, إِذَا جَاءَ نَصْرُ اللَّهِ. Nasr is victory. وَالْفَتْحِ, and the conquest. And this is in the conquest of Mecca. Fettah, Mecca. And huge numbers of people accepted Islam after this. And those who performed Hajj with the Prophet ﷺ just before he passed away were thousands and thousands. So Allah Ta'ala says, إِذَا جَاءَ نَصْرُ اللَّهِ وَالْفَتْحِ وَرَأَيْتَ النَّاسَ. And you see people, يَدْخُلُونَ فِي دِينِ اللَّهِ أَفْوَاجًا, entering into the religion of Allah in groups, large groups of people, in multitudes. فَسَبِّحْ بِحَمْدِ رَبِّكَ وَاسْتَغْفِرْ. فَسَبِّحْ بِحَمْدِ رَبِّكَ وَاسْتَغْفِرْ. So praise in thanks the name of your Lord, وَاسْتَغْفِرْ, and seek forgiveness from him. إِنَّهُ كَانَ تَوَّابًا. Indeed, he is a tawab, someone who oft forgives and accepts people's repentance. It's a nice and clear surah, but Abdullah ibn Abbas, when he was a young man, he was a teenager, or slightly older than that perhaps, but he was a young man. Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu asked some of the Sahaba, what do you say about this verse? What do you say about this verse? And this incident is reported by Imam al-Bukhari rahimahullah in his Sahih. So Umar says to some of the Sahaba, what do you say about this verse? So they said, it's saying that if Allah Ta'ala gives the Prophet ﷺ victory and Fettah, the conquest, then he should praise Allah Ta'ala and seek forgiveness. That's it. They gave the literal translation. That's the tafsir, that's what it means, as simple as that. So Umar said to Ibn Abbas, what do you say about it? And Ibn Abbas is the mufassir of the Sahaba, the Imam of tafsir of the companions. So he said, this surah shows that the time of the Prophet ﷺ is near. It means the Prophet ﷺ is about to pass away. So they said, how? Where in the verse does it talk about this? And Umar said to him, exactly what you say, that's what I say. Because he says the Prophet ﷺ is a prophet, that's his job. And Allah Ta'ala in this surah is telling him, إِذَا جَاءَ نَصْرُ اللَّهِ وَالْفَتْحِ. The victory of Allah has come. وَرَأَيْتَ النَّاسَ يَدْخُلُونَ فِي دِينِ اللَّهِ أَفْوَاجًا. And people are accepting Islam in huge armies. So your job is finished. You have done your job. فَسَبِّحْ بِحَمْدِ رَبِّكَ وَاسْتَغْفِرْ. So praise the name of your Lord and seek forgiveness. إِنَّهُ كَانَ تَوَّابًا. So Ibn Abbas extracted from this verse that the time of the Prophet ﷺ was near, and that's true, and that's exactly what happened, because this was one of the latest surah to be revealed to the Prophet ﷺ. In the following surah, and this is the last surah before we come to the three known as the three quls, قُلْ وَاللَّهُ أَحَدْ قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ الْفَلَقِ قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ النَّاسِ. And it's Surah Al-Masad. In it Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, تَبَّتْ يَدَا أَبِي لَهَبٍ وَتَبٍّ. May the hands of Abu Lahab be ruined. وَتَبٍّ. And he is ruined. Because the Prophet ﷺ gathered the people, called out to the people of Quraysh, and was raising his voice in them, saying, if I told you that an army was coming from behind this mountain, if I told you that an army was coming from behind this mountain, would you believe what I'm telling you? So they all said, yes, of course. We've never heard you lie. We've never heard you say something that's not true. We'd believe what you say. So he said to them, well, if that's the case, if you believe what I say, then I'm telling you that Allah has sent me as a warner and as a person to give glad tidings. So Abu Lahab said to him, Tabban lak, alihada jama'tana, may your hands be ruined. That was like an insult to say, what are you doing? Tabban lak, alihada jama'tana, you gathered us all for that? You told us to come just to tell us this? So Allah Ta'ala revealed in response to this incident, Tabbat yada Abi Lahabin wa tab. May the hands of Abu Lahab be ruined. Wa tab, and he will be ruined. Ma aghna anhu maluhu wa ma kasab. His wealth and his children, wa ma kasab, refers to children. His wealth and his children haven't benefited him in any way. Sayasla naran dhata lahab. Indeed, he will be entered into a fire that is filled with flames. And the amazing thing is that this surah was revealed whilst Abu Lahab was still alive. And Abu Lahab was promised and told that he will die upon disbelief whilst he is alive. And so, logically speaking, Abu Lahab could easily have pretended to be a Muslim, claimed to be a Muslim, even if it's not true, claimed to be a Muslim. And some of the other hypocrites could have said, look, the Qur'an says that Abu Lahab is going to be in hellfire, and Abu Lahab has entered Islam, he's accepted Islam. And this Qur'an of yours is false. But none of that happened. None of that happened because Allah Ta'ala doesn't need someone to challenge him. He's the one who knows the ending of every person. So he revealed these verses whilst Abu Lahab was still alive. And Abu Lahab passed away and died upon disbelief. Then Allah Ta'ala said, وَامْرَأَتُهُ حَمَّالَةَ الْحَطَبِ. And his wife is a carrier of branches, wood with thorns. فِي جِيدِهَا حَبْلٌ مِّن مَسَدٍ. And some of the scholars of tafsir say that the wife of Abu Lahab used to throw things in the path of the Prophet ﷺ. As he's walking, she would throw things in the path of the Prophet ﷺ. And Ibn Kathir rahimahullah, although not many scholars of tafsir say this, but Ibn Kathir says, وَامْرَأَتُهُ حَمَّالَةَ الْحَطَبِ. His wife is someone who's carrying wood. This is relating to the Day of Judgment. That the wife of Abu Lahab will be adding to the fuel of the fire for Abu Lahab. So just as she helped her husband Abu Lahab to harm the Prophet ﷺ on the Day of Judgment, she will be contributing in fueling the fire with wood, carrying wood and fueling the fire for her own husband Abu Lahab. And that's not surprising if that's the case, because as we said many times, the things that a person does in the dunya, their return is in the akhirah in equal fashion. Jaza'un wifaqa. A jaza, a return that is equal to what you used to do. Fi jidiha hablum min masad. Around her neck is a rope of masad, a chain or fiber, something like that. Again, this refers to the akhirah. In the following surah, and this surah is called Surah Al-Ikhlas. What's Ikhlas? Sincerity. What's Ikhlas linguistically? Something is khalis. Pure. Something is khalis, it's pure. And how is purity similar to sincerity?
Sincerity will not come without the purity. Purity will
Okay.
come first, then sincerity.
Perhaps pure sincerity won't come except with a pure heart. And what about sincerity itself and purity?
There's no doubt that it's
Sorry?
there's no doubt
No doubt.
that it's not impure.
Okay, it's not mixed with anything else.
Something which is full of purity. It's
No.
very clear.
Very
Very clear.
Why? Because something that's pure, if it's mixed with something else, does it become totally impure? Or does it remain something pure but with impurities in it? That can happen. Sincerity is the same. Sincerity, it's not either sincere or insincere. There is a grey area in between.
Yeah.
Someone might begin doing something sincerely. Firstly, what's sincerity? Just so that we are clear. What does sincerity mean? If I'm doing something sincerely,
Something I'm doing without expecting any returns.
okay, right, expecting a return, reward,
Honest with good intention.
honestly with a pure and good intention. Anything else?
Doing something good, doing it good in a perfect way, following all the.
Are you doing something purely in a correct and valid manner? Yeah.
Doing it for the sake of what you're doing it
Doing it?
for the sake of what you're doing it for.
Okay, doing it for the sake of a specific thing, specified intention. Yeah.
From your heart.
Good, doing something from the heart without just doing it outwardly. So all of these points have a meaning of sincerity in them. And so sincerity is for a person to seek Allah when it comes to religious in the religious context. It's for someone to do something seeking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And seeking that which Allah loves. Seeking that which Allah loves. And the topic of sincerity is long, which we can't delve into now. But it can often be mixed. And this is why the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, أَخْوَفُ مَا أَخَافُ عَلَيْكُمْ الشِّرْكُ الْأَصْغَرُ. The thing that I fear for you most is minor shirk. Then he said, what's minor shirk? It's riya, showing off. Because showing off can sometimes be a very subtle thing. I think that I'm doing something sincerely. Maybe in one act of worship, some of it is sincere, some of it is insincere. Maybe someone can start doing something sincerely, and then after that intention changes. And then they have to bring themselves back and remember, and then intention changes. And so this issue of sincerity is very difficult. And so it does require practice, and it requires work. And it requires belittling people. It requires belittling people, realizing that people don't mean that much. People don't mean that much. If our whole life is concerned about what people think of us, that's problematic. Because there's no way everyone can be happy with us. The nicest of people, and the best mannered of people, and the most truthful of people, the Prophet ﷺ had enemies and people who hated him. So how can we expect the whole world to like us? It's impossible. Sometimes we think to ourselves, oh, I'm trying my best to have amazing character. What's wrong with this person? Why is he causing trouble with me? Okay. Yeah, you know, even, I was going to say you're not Jibreel, but even Jibreel has enemies. Even Jibreel has enemies. And that's explicitly mentioned in the Qur'an. من كان عدوا لله وملائكته وجبريل وميكال فإن الله عدو للكافرين. Anyone who's an enemy to Allah and His angels, and Jibreel and Mikal, then Allah is an enemy to the disbelievers. Even angels. Anyone ever seen an angel walking around? Have you interacted with an angel? Have you ever spoken to him? Have you ever done business with an angel? And still people hate angels. So if that's the case with angels, there's no way human beings are going to be safe. No way in the world. So ikhlas is like that. It's a case of doing things purely. And things don't require that much. For a person to enter Jannah, it doesn't actually require that much. It just requires a few key things, but done properly and purely. And this is why we find in so many hadiths, someone did this and that and entered Jannah. I think, is that it? I'm struggling here 70 years, killing myself and struggling and striving and doing this and doing... and I don't know if I'm going to end up in Jannah or Jannah. This guy feeds a dog or feeds a cat or, gives sadaqah to someone and enters Jannah. Because sincerity is what counts. Things done sincerely. This surah doesn't have the word ikhlas in it, but it's called the Surah Al-Ikhlas. Even though usually chapters are named after words that are contained in that surah. Not in this case. Surah Al-Ikhlas, it's called Surah Al-Ikhlas because if a person knows who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is, then that should lead to ikhlas. If a person knows who Allah ta'ala is, then that should automatically lead to ikhlas. And when the Prophet ﷺ was asked about Allah, the Prophet ﷺ was asked about Allah. Who is this God of yours? Allah revealed, قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ. الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. And قل هو الله أحد, Allah is one in His attributes and qualities and can't be compared to anyone. قل هو الله أحد. الله الصمد. What does صمد mean? قل هو الله أحد. Ahad is well known. Allah is one in all of His ways. Allah الصمد.
He's alone, he doesn't have any partners. There's no partners for him.
طيب, it returns to that. It comes back to that. Yes.
He has no wife.
That's going to be mentioned in, although it's part of it as well, but it's going to be mentioned more explicitly in the following verse. Think of the context of the rest of the verses. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد. نعم. Huh? قوة, able to do all. طيب, okay. ثابت غير متغير. See, interestingly, the scholars of tafsir have mentioned these things, several things, because it's a word that the scholars of tafsir even differed over its exact meaning, and they mentioned some of these similar meanings. Some of the scholars of tafsir from the tabi'een mentioned that it means someone who doesn't have any partner, like we mentioned here, doesn't have a wife, and doesn't have. And others mentioned that he's the one who's worthy of being worshipped, the only one worthy of being worshipped. And others said the one who's self-sufficient, doesn't need anyone, free of need. This is the famous tafsir of this word. Allah as-Samad, the one who doesn't need anything. قل هو الله أحد. Say Allah is Ahad. Allah as-Samad, as-Samad being someone who is self-sufficient, not in need of anything else. قل هو الله أحد الله as-Samad. What's next? لم يلد ولم يولد. What does that mean?
No beginning, no end.
Sorry?
No beginning, no end.
Okay, it does mean that. What's the literal translation? لم يلد
Was never born
ولم يولد.
and was never given birth to.
Nah, he doesn't give birth, doesn't have any children, nor was he ever given birth to. ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. What does kuf mean? Yeah.
Because he's equal to everybody.
There's no one equal. Yeah, no, good. Well done. ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. Al-kuf is the one who's equal, or equivalent, or similar. ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. There's nobody who is equal to. Okay. Now we're left with the last two chapters of the Qur'an, and these two chapters are known as al-mu'awwidhatayn. What's isti'adha? If you say a'udhu billah, what does that mean? Seeking refuge in Allah. What does that mean? Seeking protection from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yeah? It's more of seeking protection in Allah, going back to Allah, seeking His help from something that we fear. And Shaykh Abdul Hamid ibn Badiz rahimahullah ta'ala, one of the well-known scholars of Algeria rahimahullah, says that evil is created in this world. This world is filled with good and evil. And there are several wisdoms behind evil existing. Evil and harmful things exist in this world for what reasons? What are some of the reasons that bad things happen in this world? As a trial from Allah Ta'ala, لِيَبْلُوَكُمْ, so that Allah may see who is truthful and who isn't. What else? Are there other benefits to evil happening? Good. It gives us a means of comparing. If I don't know what evil is, how am I going to know what good is? If I don't know what cold is, how am I going to know what warmth is? My whole life is warmth. I'm not going to see that blessing. If I don't know what it's like to be blind, how easy is it to be grateful to have eyes? It's difficult. But the one who can't see and then can see, okay, or the one who can't walk and then can walk, or the one who can't speak and then can speak, these blessings that we always have are difficult to be grateful for. And so when evil happens, we have that comparison which gives us gratitude. What are you going to say?
To see how patient you are.
Okay, good. As a trial to see how patient you are. And what else? And another important thing that Sheikh Abdul Hamid mentions, evil develops people. Harm and evil develops people. And when people face difficulties and face hardships, doesn't that develop experience in people? Doesn't that develop lessons in people? Doesn't that teach people? Of course. A lot of our learning comes through bad experiences. And this is why when a bad experience is occurring, it's always worth looking at it long term and saying, okay, it's happened now, it's an experience. It's an experience. This is one of the good ways of overcoming any challenges that face us in the world. It's an experience. I shouldn't have done this, or this shouldn't have been said, or that shouldn't have been done, but it's an experience. It's not worth regretting things that have happened, because the past can't be changed. It doesn't matter what we do, the past can't be changed. We can do things that correct mistakes to the best of our ability, but things that are finished, done and dusted, it's not worth thinking about too much, and they should be seen as experiences. Now, when we face hardships, Ibn Badis mentions 5 things that we can use as a protection from those things. The first is strong iman, strong aqidah. So 5 things that we can use to protect ourselves from other types of harm. Strong iman to protect us from many things, including doubt and including falling apart when challenges happen and difficulties come. And it teaches us to be patient and to submit to Allah and to be grateful to Allah. So strong aqidah is the first thing. The second thing is sound knowledge. Sound knowledge to protect us from the evil of ignorance, because ignorance is a great evil. Ignorance is a great evil. And so this is why things that result in ignorance are not allowed. Spreading falsehood is haram. Speaking without knowledge is haram. Taking drinks and intoxicants that damage our minds is also prohibited for those reasons. Because the mind and the intellect should be protected and preserved. And knowledge is a good thing. Knowledge is something encouraged for all people. Men and women, young and old. And the third thing is the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because worship keeps us occupied with good and occupied away from evil. And the fourth thing he mentioned, rahimahullah, is general good actions. Because worship is worshipping Allah. And good deeds includes good dealings with people, interacting with people and so on and so forth, to keep us firm and stable. Fifthly, and this is the part that's relevant to the surah, it is words. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has taught us certain words that we can use as a protection from evil and as a protection from harm. And these 2 surah are from the best things that a person can say. And it's reported by Abu Dawood and Ibn Khuzaymah and others, and authenticated by Ibn Khuzaymah rahimahullah, al-Bazzar and other imams of hadith, that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, the best things that you can seek refuge in Allah the best things that you can seek refuge in Allah with, and the best things that you can make isti'adha with is قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ الْفَلَقِ قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ النَّاسِ قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ الْفَلَقِ قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ النَّاسِ. And Aisha radiallahu anha has reported that when these verses were revealed, the Prophet ﷺ would just use them as a ruqyah and as a protection and so on. He'd rely on these 2 chapters. And notice how when the Prophet ﷺ makes isti'adha or performs ruqyah either upon himself or when he hears of other people performing ruqyah, how is the ruqyah? How do we find it? Is it lengthy and difficult, or is it simple and easy? Very basic ruqyah. Like in the hadith of the man who performed ruqyah with Surah Al-Fatiha. And the Prophet ﷺ, when he found out, he said, وَمَا يُدْرِكَ أَنَّهَا رُقْيَةٌ? Who told you that it was a ruqyah? And he affirmed his action. Surah Al-Fatiha. And what else? قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ الْفَلَقِ قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ النَّاسِ. Aisha reports that the Prophet ﷺ before going to sleep would recite قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ الْفَلَقِ قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ النَّاسِ, and blow into his hands and wipe over his body. That's it. It's as simple as that. No punching involved, no striking involved, no kicking involved, no bringing loudspeakers and screaming into the loudspeaker to try and kick the jinn out or kick magic out. None of that type of stuff. All it is simple recitation of Surah Al-Fatiha, قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ الْفَلَقِ وَقُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ النَّاسِ, and that's it. And also basic adhkar, Bismillah أرقيك من كل شيء يؤذيك, and رب الناس اذهب البأس واشفي أنت الشافي لا شفاء إلا شفاءك شفاء لا يغادر سقما. 2-3 lines, one line. That's the ruqyah of the Prophet ﷺ. But the difference is that this ruqyah is being performed with what? With iman and sincerity. That's the difference. That's the difference. Hundreds of people are reading Qur'an every day. So it's not just the words in and of themselves, it's the quality of words. And this is why the first rule of giving ruqyah is what? La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. There's no will, there's no power except with Allah. I find it amazing that the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba and the Tabi'een recite one surah, 2 surah, 2 or 3 times, and they find cure immediately. And we sit for 4 years reading Surah Al-Baqarah every day and nothing changes. And maybe Iraqi comes to visit the house and uses sticks, and uses bats, and uses pens. And I'm not exaggerating, these are things I've seen in my own eyes. I've seen doors used. You know what a door is? The door that we open and close. Doors. Used to take things out of people. What type of ruqyah is that? This is going to require some serious convincing for me to be convinced that this is a positive way of performing ruqyah. No chance. No chance. No way in the world. But the point is, we have over-exaggerated this issue. We've over-exaggerated this issue. And we've got 2 groups of people. Those who reject the concept of magic altogether, and those who reject the concept of jinn, and those who reject the concept of the evil eye, and envy and so on altogether. And that's false. It's false because it's established in the Qur'an and established in the Sunnah. These are matters of the unseen. If we accept Allah Ta'ala, and we accept the angels, and we accept the Akhirah and Jannah and Nar, because the Creator is the one who revealed it to us, then we also accept these things because the Creator revealed them to us. And we have another group of people that links every harm that's ever happened to sihr, jinn, evil eye, and envy and things like that. That's not always the case. That's not always the case. And for a lot of people, most of what they believe to be magic and jinn is untrue in the first place. Is untrue in the first place. And this is why you'll find that people who perform ruqyah, and I don't mean to be critical of people who perform ruqyah, but I'm critical of a certain type of ruqyah. If you go to a person who performs ruqyah, they've all got their own different story. One raqi says she has jinn in her, another raqi says this is black magic, another raqi says she's got 30 jinn, another raqi says she's got a whole family of jinn, another raqi says she's got the evil eye, another raqi says... And everyone has their own explanation, their own tafsir. This is the world of the unseen. It's the world of the unseen. It's not something that we can just see visibly with our eyes like this. And the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba aren't reported to have delved into these things, into detail, and speaks to the person and tries to speak to what's within the individual. Who did this to you? What happened to you? And so on and so forth. These things are limited. They're to be restricted. And if there is a shifa in something, that's fine. If there is a cure in something that is proven to be a cure, then alhamdulillah. And in the hadith, لا بأس بالرقية ما لم يكن شركا. There's no harm in ruqyah so long as it doesn't contain shirk. But what also needs to be kept in mind is that a person shouldn't go to extremes and shouldn't delve too much into what the problem is. They should just know the Qur'an is a shifa for every problem. Okay, the problem is evil eye. Okay. We're going to do the same thing anyway. Recite al-Fatiha, قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ الْفَلَقِ قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ النَّاسِ, Assalamu alaikum. That's it. We're waiting for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's shifa. We do the best that we can. Nothing is overpowering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is another false belief. We have this idea that magic and the world of the jinn and so on is so powerful. That's false. That's completely false. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala explicitly says about sihr and magic, وَمَا هُمْ بِضَارِّينَ بِهِ مِنْ أَحَدٍ إِلَّا بِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ. And they will not be able to harm anyone except with the permission of Allah. And this is why really ruqyah is what? Ruqyah is faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's what ruqya is. With some words being recited like a Fatiha and these types of surah. And a person shouldn't overthink these types of things. And the more someone overthinks stuff, the more likely they are to think they are impacted, or maybe even impacted. And this is certainly true. And I've seen lots of people with my own eyes who thought that they are, there's sihr in them, or there's magic in them, or there's this in them, or that in them, and 2-3 years later it turns out they're fine. But they had maybe some challenges or some difficulties, and then this idea stuck in their head, and it stayed with them, stayed with them. And may Allah guide some of the people who perform ruqya, they make it worse. They convince them more. They tell them, yes, you've got. They're very strong, very difficult. I tried to get them out, I couldn't get them out. So stop trying them. Let someone else who can do a job properly do it. Don't sit and recite Surah Al-Baqarah from morning till evening and say, I tried. Surah Al-Baqarah doesn't benefit. To the extent that some people asked some of the scholars, Shaykh, I've tried the Qur'an, it's not working. What should I try next? He said, the Qur'an doesn't work. You want to try something else? The Qur'an doesn't work. What are you going to try? The Bible? You're going to try another book? The Qur'an's not working. Nothing's going to work. That means there's something wrong in the method of trying. Anyhow, we spent some time on this topic because it's an irritating topic. And that's because it is dealt with incorrectly too much. And it's problematic. It's problematic because it's actually a deficiency in tawheed. If we have this idea that we are weak and even with Allah's help we can do nothing, and even with the Qur'an we can do nothing, that's a big problem in our iman. And to think that these weak things that Allah has created are so powerful that we can do nothing about them, that's a deficiency in understanding. And nothing harms except with Allah's permission. It doesn't matter what it is. Don't tell me powerful or not powerful, nothing harms without Allah's permission. قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ الْفَلَقِ. Say, O Messenger, I seek refuge with the Lord of Al-Falaq, the daybreak. Min sharri ma khalaq. I seek refuge in Allah from the evil that's been created. That could be any evil. And this is why this surah is such a beautiful surah for protection, because it encompasses all evil. قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ الْفَلَقِ مِنْ شَرِّ مَا خَلَقَ. From any evil. Jinn, sihr, evil eye, whether it is black magic, whether it is someone's physical harm, psychological harm, mental harm, words, anything. Iman, doubts, disputes, it could be anything, any type of harm. This is seeking protection from those things by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. من شر ما خلق ومن شر غاسق إذا وقب. And I seek refuge in Allah from the evil of the night when it comes in. إذا وقب, i.e. if it falls. Because the night in and of itself is not harmful. The night in and of itself is not bad. In fact, there are many benefits in the night. But the night can often be a cause of crime and the cause of other harm because it's an unseen period of the day. And it may also be a cause of animals, certain harmful animals, more likely to harm and things like that. But the point is, the night itself isn't harmful. But what the night brings sometimes can be harmful, so we seek refuge in Allah from that. وَمِن شَرِّ غَاسِقٍ إِذَا وَقَبَ وَمِن شَرِّ النَّفَّاثَاتِ فِي الْعُقَدِ. And I seek refuge in Allah from those who blow into the knots, i.e. magicians. And again, النَّفَّاثَات, those who blow into knots. The nafth itself is not harmful. Because the Prophet ﷺ himself, like we just said, used to recite Qur'an and then perform nafth, which is to blow air and possibly with a slight amount of saliva. Slight amount, not spitting. It's not spitting. But it is more of a blowing, but with a slight use of saliva, and that's light. It's not something that you can feel or something that is... So that in and of itself again is not evil. And similar to the evil eye, as the scholars rahimahumullah say, the eye itself is not evil. Someone looking at you is not harmful. And someone using this method of nafth, blowing, is also not harmful. But if the nafs, if the soul of a person that is performing this action is the soul of a magician, and the magician is evil, and the magician is vile, then that evil is sort of transferred onto another person and may cause harm. Similarly, if a person recites Qur'an and is a person of Iman and Taqwa, then this could be used as a form of ruqyah, not as a form of harm. Same with looking. Sometimes a person looking at you makes you happy and delighted. And other times a person's look can be a cause of harm. And this shows that it's about a person's inside. And these are three things, these three things have something in common. And that is that all of them are hidden. Min sharri ghasiqin idha waqab. From the night. The night is a hidden thing. And evil that occur in the night are hidden. وَمِن شَرِّ النَّفَّاثَاتِ فِي الْعُقَدِ. And the practice of magicians is hidden. Practice of magicians is something that's hidden. وَمِن شَرِّ حَاسِدٍ إِذَا حَسَدٍ. And from the evil of the envier, when he envies. Hasad is envy. Someone who envies you, someone who doesn't like that you have certain good things. That's a hasid. That's another hidden thing. You can't tell he envies, he doesn't envy. There might be signs to suggest, but you can't be certain that a person envies, or it's not usually as clear. And when something is hidden, it's more harmful. And this is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us to seek refuge in Him from these hidden harms. Finally, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ends with Surah An-Nas and says, قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ النَّاسِ مَلِكِ النَّاسِ. Say, I seek refuge in the Lord of An-Nas, people. Malik al-Nas, the owner, the king of people. Ilah al-Nas, the Lord of the people. Min sharri al-waswas al-khannas, from the evil of al-waswas al-khannas. The whisperer is, al-waswas is the whisperer. Waswasa is whispering. And like we said before, the shaitan is part of the world of the unseen. So when we say that the shaitan whispers into our ears, whispers evil into our ears, what do we see? Do we hear that whispering? We might not hear that whispering. In fact, we won't hear that whispering. But we will feel the effect. We will feel the effect. And this is why often we are led towards evil. But we've never heard someone whisper into our ears to do something evil. Or evil pops into our minds to do something evil, even though we've never heard a whispering. Because we feel the impact. As for the exact action, then we can't see it or hear it because it's part of the world of the unseen. Al-Khannas is the one who goes and comes back, goes and returns. Because when we are in a state of remembering Allah, how much of an impact can the shaitan have? Limited. But when we've forgotten, the impact is strong and easy. And this is why Allah Ta'ala says, Surah Al-A'raf, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ اتَّقَوْا, those who have taqwa, إِذَا مَسَّهُمْ طَائِفٌ مِّنَ الشَّيْطَانِ تَذَكَّرُوا. If they are touched by something from the shaitan, those who have taqwa, if they are touched by the shaitan with an evil thought or a whispering, تَذَكَّرُوا, they remember immediately. فَإِذَا هُمْ مُبْصِرُونَ, and then they are able to see. They're given a light that they can see with, once again, and distinguish between good and evil. And so, the more we are in states of remembrance of Allah, the less likely we are to be impacted by the shaitan. And this is why here, sat in the masjid, to be impacted by the shaitan is much less likely. But when we go back home, the likelihood is higher again. And when we're at work, maybe it's even higher. And when we are in the masjid, again it drops. And so on. And so the more a person does to keep themselves remembered, or remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the worse the harm is. And if they are influenced by the shaitan, as we all are because we're human beings, as Allah says, تَذَكَّرُوا, they remember immediately. فَإِذَا هُمْ مُبْصِرُونَ مِنْ شَرِّ الْوَسْوَاسِ الْخَنَّاسِ الَّذِي يُوَسْوِسُ فِي صُدُورِ النَّاسِ, the one who whispers in the chests of people. مِنَ الْجِنَّةِ وَالنَّاسِ, from the jinn and from an-nas, from people. And that shows that this type of evil whispering and evil influence, see, you can see whispering as a more of a metaphorical term, as opposed to a purely physical one. And that's because people are considered to also whisper evil to us. But not necessarily literally. Not necessarily someone is whispering into our ear something evil. But being in their company and being surrounded by them and being in a certain environment leads us to doing wrong. And this is why in the hadith, al-mar'u ala dini khalilihi, a man will be upon the religion of his companion. Religion of his companion doesn't mean faith necessarily, but it means the way of his companion. Because we're human beings, we're influenced by our surroundings. We will be influenced by our surroundings. And so, this is why Allah Ta'ala commands us to seek protection in Allah Ta'ala from the night and from the evil of the unseen like sihr and those who envy people, and commands us to seek refuge in Allah from the whispering of the shaitan and the whispering of men, whispering of people, and the evil that they cause. And this is why these two chapters of the Qur'an are so encompassing, and they are the best ruqyah, and they are the best form of seeking refuge and isti'adah from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And as some of the scholars rahimahullah say, the whole of the Qur'an talks about Allah ta'ala, talks about the akhirah and so on and so forth, and then Surah Al-Ikhlas talks about the description of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then it ends with seeking refuge in that Lord that we've just been taught about, that Lord that we've just been spoken to about, and that we've been taught about. It's our time to refer back to Him, return back to Him, seek refuge in Him subhanahu wa ta'ala, because no one gets rid of harm except Him, and no one gets rid of evil except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As for the one who helps or gives advice or performs ruqyah, then he's just a means. He's a weak human being just like myself and yourself. Everyone is a weak human being. It doesn't matter who that person is. Even the Prophet ﷺ, Allah says about him, وَلَوْلَا أَن ثَبَّتْنَاكَ لَقَدْ كِدْتَ تَرْكَنُ إِلَيْهِمْ شَيْئًا قَلِيلًا. Had we not kept you firm, you would have turned towards them a little bit. You would have come closer to them, the disbelievers. Had we not kept you firm, you would have gone closer to them. This is the Prophet ﷺ, the one whose tawheed has reached the level of perfection, and iman has reached the level of perfection, knowledge has reached the level of perfection. And so that shows us that when we recite the Qur'an, or someone else recites the Qur'an, or we seek advice from someone, these are all means. We've been told to act upon these means. They're not useless. We've been told to go with them and use them. But ultimately, our hearts are with Allah. And our connection is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And our trust is in nobody except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. أقول ما تسمعون وأستغفر الله لي ولكم. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. الحمد لله رب العالمين. Before I say something else, is there anything that anyone else wants to bring up or mention?
The verse which says, إِنَّ النَّفْسَ لَأَمَّارَةٌ بِالسُّوءِ إِلَّا مَا رَحِمَ رَبِّي. Do you take from that our nafs is always desired to commit the sin?
It's similar to the hadith that we mentioned earlier, that the person's heart can lean, is accepting of good and accepting of evil. And the verse that he mentions is in the nafs al-ammaratu bis-su'. The nafs commands to do evil. The nafs commands to do evil. That's its nature. That's its nature. And it's more in some people than others, of course. And it's less in other people. And in some people it might be very, very weak and very little. But that all depends on us. Because just as the body, and this is an important principle, just as the body gets used to practice, the nafs gets used to something with practice. Just as the body gets used to something with practice, the nafs get used to something with practice. If someone has been waking up for fajr on time for 20 years consecutively, has physical strength got anything to do with this? Nothing. Nothing. Zero. Person could be quite unhealthy maybe physically, but he's waking up for fajr. And one person could be extremely healthy, very fit and very strong, but can't wake up for fajr, just simply can't do that. Because just as the body, when it's trained to do something, it gets used to it, the nafs gets used to it. Also character, when it's trained, when we train our character in something, it gets used to it. It gets used to it. It's not. There is an element of people naturally having certain things. There is that element. But as a general rule, we can change things. We can change our physical bodies. We can change our spiritual selves. We can teach ourselves patience. We can teach ourselves knowledge. We can teach ourselves iman. We can teach ourselves worship. These things are developed. And nafsu amaratun bisu' as a tendency but it can be worked on and it can be changed. I also remind that on Tuesday, inshallah ta'ala, once again, for those who weren't here at the khutbah, that Sheikh Ahsan Hanif, wafaqahullah, is going to start classes of tafsir here in the masjid, inshallah ta'ala, beginning from the first chapter of the Qur'an all the way until, if Allah wills, the end of the Qur'an. It's a very beneficial project, and we're very blessed actually to have this type of dars in this masjid. And we're also blessed to have a teacher like Sheikh Ahsan, who first graduated from the University of Medina and then did his PhD in Islamic Studies at the University of Birmingham. He's well known in teaching ilm, teaching various sciences of Islam. He's delivered the khutbah here previously, and I'm sure most of you would have heard of him or heard of some of his classes. So there's a lot to take away, inshallah ta'ala. Tuesdays at 7:30, every Tuesday, inshallah, 7:30. So it's worth attend this Tuesday if you can, and try to encourage other people to attend too, inshallah ta'ala. Because we might attend these classes and think, oh, I attend, but I'm not going to remember the whole tafsir of the Qur'an, or I'm forgetting so much. That's fine. That's fine. Forgetting knowledge is not something that's ideal, of course, but it's something that's normal. And if we remembered everything that we ever heard, all of us would be scholars. So it's normal for us to forget things, but simply being in a gathering of Qur'an is a big blessing. And if we put more effort in by taking notes, and we don't have to write down everything he says, but useful things, and then going away and revising, after a year or 2 years or 3 years, we'll find that actually we've gained huge amounts of knowledge. And this applies to these classes that I'm talking about, that are going to begin on Tuesday, or anywhere else. Anywhere else. Not everyone is going to, necessarily be able to attend. Not everyone is going to necessarily remain in this area, or some people might, whatever. As a general rule, attending classes of knowledge and constantly learning, it really is a life-changing thing. It changes a person's life. So that's that. Wallahu a'lam. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam.